Sophia was my college girlfriend, or rather, the girl I paid to date me. But I never treated her like a plaything, even if that's how others saw us. No one believed a rich kid could truly love someone from her world. And then, without explanation, I dumped her. Years later, we met again. I was now a massage therapist at a luxury spa. She, now a millionaire, booked me for a private session. After graduation, my family went bankrupt. My father fled with his mistress. That same year, I killed a man in an act of excessive self-defense and spent 2 years in prison. While inside, an old inmate taught me therapeutic massage. Now, I work at the spa where former socialites, women who once chased me, book sessions just to humiliate me. I endure it because I need the money. As I was about to leave for the day, the manager called out, "Jason, VIP Suite 8888, major client. Nail this and you might not need to work for the rest of the year." Apprehension tightened in my gut as I grabbed my kit. The wealthier the client, the higher the chance they'd be a creep. Just that morning, I had a session with a woman who must have weighed over 400 lb. She slapped me in the face repeatedly while I worked on her. $1,000 for the session, a slap included. I knocked on the door to Suite 888. "Come in," said a cool, young voice. I stepped in and froze. A woman sat on the living room sofa, dressed in a sleek black power suit. Her long hair fell loosely over her shoulders, a contrast to the sharp lines of her outfit. Her face was more breathtaking than I remembered. Back in college, Sophia had been gorgeous with a touch of innocence. Now she exuded a powerful, matured beauty. It was her. Back then, her world had fallen apart. Her father, a construction worker, had been severely injured on a job site. The contractor disappeared, leaving them drowning in medical bills. She considered dropping out of school, but her mother insisted she stay. Her underachieving younger brother dropped out instead to work at a bar. One night, he got into trouble with some thugs, and they shattered his legs. The shock hospitalized her mother. Suddenly, the weight of her entire family landed on Sophia's shoulders. She was desperate. That's when she chose to sell her body. On campus, I had a reputation as a rich playboy. I'd flirted with Sophia once, but she turned me down. I backed off. Then, one day in front of a crowd, she came to me. "I'll be your girlfriend," she announced, "if you lend me $500,000. I agreed to the loan, but told her she didn't need to be my girlfriend. I wasn't the kind of man to exploit someone's desperation. But the day I transferred the money, she showed up at my door, soaked from the rain, her blouse clinging to her. I gave her dry clothes, and we sat in silence until she said, "Jason, until I pay back that $500,000, I'm yours. When the debt is clear, you can give me my freedom back." I wanted to tell her the money meant nothing to me, but I knew saying that would destroy her pride. So I said, "Then you can be my housekeeper." From that day on, Sophia lived with me. She cooked, managed my life, and cleaned me up when I came home drunk. The other girls hated her, called her names, tried to ruin her. She never complained, she never defended herself. She just endured it. When I found out, I tried to protect her, but it only made things worse. Accidents started happening, a basketball to the face, a fall down the stairs. So I changed tactics. I humiliated her publicly, pretending she meant nothing to me, just to stop their attacks. And it worked. Then came the downfall. My father disappeared with his mistress. The company collapsed. I went to prison. Before I was taken away, I did 2 things. I broke up with Sophia and I signed the deed of a penthouse over to her. Now our roles had reversed. She was the CEO of a gaming company. I was a spa masseur 1 step away from being a gigolo. When she saw me standing there in the doorway, a cold smile touched her lips. "I hear you'll do anything for the right price." "Something like that," I replied, suppressing the emotions surging inside me. She opened her vintage Louis Vuitton bag and tossed several thick stacks of cash onto the sofa. I remembered that bag. I had given it to her for her birthday. She'd said it was too precious to use. Why did she still have it? "I hear your technique is quite good," she said. "Come and massage my feet." I lowered myself before her, my hands trembling slightly as I took her delicate feet into my palms. Her heels were rougher now, not the soft skin of a college girl, but the calloused proof of a woman who had fought her way to the top. As I worked, she watched me with a cool detachment that cut deeper than any words. Finally, she spoke. "Jason, did you ever love me? Or was it just pity?" The question hit harder than prison walls. My hands stilled for a moment before I forced them to keep moving. Sophia, I whispered. You were the only real thing I ever had. Her eyes flickered, but her face stayed cold. Then why did you leave me when I needed you most? I couldn't tell her the truth, that I had left to protect her, that I gave her the penthouse so she'd never suffer again. So I said nothing. Silence was safer than the truth. But in that silence, I realized something. She wasn't here for revenge. She wanted answers. And maybe, just maybe, a part of her still cared. That night, after the session, as I packed my things, she said, "Come tomorrow, same time." And just like that, our twisted story began again. Sophia kept booking me. Each session was a mix of cruelty and care, coldness and quiet moments that reminded me of the girl I once knew. She'd insult me, throw money at me, but then let her guard down, asking about my life, my scars, my time in prison. One night, after a particularly long silence, she admitted, "When you left me, I swore I'd never forgive you. I built everything I have just to prove I didn't need you. But when I saw you today, part of me felt like that foolish girl again. I wanted to reach for her, but I held back, because now the power was hers. Still, there were moments, small, fragile moments, where the walls between us cracked, a brush of her hand, a look that lingered too long. And then, one evening, she asked me to follow her out to the balcony of her penthouse. The city lights spread beneath us like a sea of fire. She stood close, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jason, do you ever wonder what would have happened if things were different?" My throat tightened. Every damn day. She turned to me then, and for the first time in years, her eyes softened. No boardroom mask, no cold CEO. Just Sophia, the girl who once stood in the rain and said she'd be mine until her debt was repaid. Something had shifted between us after that night on the balcony. It wasn't loud or obvious, but it was there, a quiet understanding, an invisible thread that tethered us back to something we had long buried. She stopped avoiding me. She stopped testing me. In some small, careful way, she started trusting me again. The next morning, I woke up to the scent of fresh coffee. When I stepped into the kitchen, Sophia was there. She was barefoot, wearing a hoodie that looked suspiciously like one of mine from college. Her hair was pulled into a lazy bun, and she was pouring coffee into 2 mugs. "Morning," she said, not looking at me. "Good morning," I replied, surprised. She handed me a mug. "You still take it black, right?" I nodded slowly. She leaned against the counter, sipping hers in silence. For a while, we just stood there, 2 people pretending it was normal to share coffee before the sun was up. "You have a meeting at 10 Scar," I said eventually. "I know," she replied. "I just didn't sleep. Nightmares." She looked up at me, her expression unreadable. "No, just memories." I took a sip of coffee. Same thing. She didn't argue. That day her schedule was lighter than usual. A strategy meeting in the morning, a press call in the afternoon, and then an empty evening. When I asked her if she wanted her usual spa session, she shook her head. "Cancel it. Let's go out." I stared at her. "Out?" "Yes," she said, looking through her closet. "Unless you've forgotten how to go on a date." "A date?" The word landed in my chest with a strange warmth. By 5 in the evening, we were in a black SUV headed downtown. She wore a navy blue dress, understated but elegant. I wore one of the tailored suits she kept in the back of my wardrobe, untouched until now. The driver kept quiet. We didn't speak much either, but her fingers found mine during the ride, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was going somewhere with her, not just physically, but emotionally. We stopped at a small restaurant tucked away in an alley. It was quiet, intimate, the kind of place we never could have afforded back in college. The host knew her by name. "Your usual table, Miss Sophia?" She nodded. We were led to a quiet corner with warm lighting and soft jazz playing overhead. As we sat, I watched her from across the table. "You've changed," I said softly. "So have you. You're stronger now." "So are you," she replied, smiling faintly. The food arrived. We ate slowly. No rush, no tension, just small talk, laughter, shared glances. At one point, she leaned over the table and said, "You're still a terrible liar." I laughed. What gave me away? "You've been pretending all night not to be nervous." "I am, I admit it. This feels like a dream I'm scared to wake up from." Her eyes softened. "Maybe we don't need to wake up yet." After dinner, we walked through the city streets. It had started to drizzle. She didn't seem to care. Her hands slipped into mine again as we passed glowing storefronts and the distant sound of street musicians. Everything felt quiet, peaceful, possible. Then she said something I hadn't expected. "I want to show you something." She led me down a different street into a part of the city I hadn't visited in years. We turned a corner, and there it was. The old bookstore. It was dusty. The sign half faded, but it was still there. The same shop where we used to spend hours browsing, use novels, and arguing over which author was better. She walked up to the door and pushed it open. The bell chimed. "Still smells the same," she said. We wandered inside. The shopkeeper nodded at her as if this wasn't her first time back. She stopped at the back corner where the fantasy section used to be and pulled a book from the shelf. She handed it to me. It was my favorite novel, the copy I had lost years ago. "You replaced it?" I asked, surprised. "No," she said. "You left it with me. I just kept it." My hands trembled slightly as I held it. "I thought you threw everything away." "Not everything," she said. We left the store in silence. The rain had picked up. I took off my jacket and held it over her head. She laughed and ran ahead, her dress catching the light like a flame. I chased after her, and just like that, we were 20 again. When we got back to the penthouse, we stood in the elevator in silence. She leaned her head against my shoulder. "You make it hard to stay angry," she whispered. "Is that a good thing?" I haven't decided yet. The elevator doors opened. She didn't let go of my hand as we walked down the hall. When we reached her bedroom, she turned to face me. "I want you to stay." My breath caught here. "Tonight, every night." I searched her face, looking for hesitation. There was none. She stepped closer, but on my terms. I nodded slowly. "I understand." Her fingers brushed against my jaw. She kissed me softly. Not with heat, not with desperation, but with something far more dangerous. Hope. That night, I held her in my arms as she slept. Her head on my chest, her breath warm against my skin. For the first time in years, I felt whole again. But peace is always temporary. The next morning, Elise handed me an envelope. Sophia was gone. No note, no explanation, just a one-line text hours later. "Needed space, do not call." I paced the penthouse like a caged animal. I went through the motions, I cleaned, I prepared the spa, I organized her office, but she didn't return that day or the next, or the day after that. 3 days passed before I finally asked Elise, "Where is she?" "Overseas," she replied. "Business trip." I didn't believe it, not fully, because Sophia didn't run from business. She ran from emotion, and I had gotten too close. On the 4th night, I found myself back in my old room. Not the guest suite, not the place beside her, the servants' quarters. I sat on the bed holding the book she had given me. My thumb traced the worn spine. I closed my eyes. I remembered the last time she disappeared, back in college. It was a weekend. She had gone home to visit her family. She returned 3 days later with a black eye and a stitched lip. She never explained. She just crawled into bed with me and cried until she fell asleep. Even then, she kept her pain locked away. The next morning, she came back. No warning, no announcement. She walked into the kitchen like nothing had happened. I was preparing breakfast. "You're back?" I said, trying not to sound shaken. "Did you miss me?" she asked. "Every second." She sat at the counter and watched me for a while. Then she said, without looking at me, "I needed to know if I could leave you again." My hands froze. "And I can't," she said softly. "But that scares me more than anything." I turned off the stove. I walked over and stood in front of her. "You don't have to run. Not from me." "I do," she said. "Because if I stay and you leave again, I won't survive it this time." I reached for her hand. "I'm not going anywhere." She met my eyes. "Promise?" "I swear." She leaned forward and rested her forehead against my chest. "Then let me break the contract." I blinked. "What?" "The clause. No physical intimacy, no romantic involvement. I'm tearing it up." "But why?" She smiled sadly. "Because I don't want to own you anymore, Jason. I want to love you." And for the first time, the walls crumbled. We didn't fall into bed. We didn't drown in passion. We just stood there clinging to each other, letting the weight of the past finally lift. That night, she burned the contract in the fireplace, and we began again. Not as employer and servant, not as debt and debtor, but as two broken people trying, just trying to find their way back to love. The next few days were a blur of quiet mornings and thoughtful conversations. Sophia and I found ourselves navigating the space between us, the tension of the past still hanging like a shadow, but with a new sense of understanding. There were no grand declarations, no immediate promises, just the gentle rebuilding of trust that had been broken in ways I couldn't even begin to explain. She let me in, little by little. I started seeing her not as the CEO who ruled an empire, but as the woman who had once been vulnerable, just like me. The walls she had built were coming down slowly but surely, but there were still moments when she would withdraw, her eyes distant, her smile fading, as though the past was still too fresh to erase. I never pushed. I knew better than anyone that healing couldn't be rushed. One evening, after a particularly long day of work, she invited me to dinner. It wasn't a formal affair, no hired chefs or extravagant plates, just a quiet meal in her kitchen, the way we used to do it before everything changed. She made pasta, my favorite, with a sauce I could never quite replicate no matter how many times I tried. I was thinking, she said, stirring the sauce, about the first time we cooked together. I raised an eyebrow. You mean when I tried to impress you with my signature dish and you nearly choked? She laughed softly, shaking her head. You still remember that? Of course I do, I said, smirking. It was the moment I realized you could never be impressed by food alone. She turned to face me, her expression softening. That was the moment I realized I was in love with you. The words hung between us, suspended in time. She didn't say it with any fanfare, no grand gesture, just the simple, quiet truth of it. I felt something stir in me, a mixture of relief, sorrow, and longing all at once. I loved you too, I said quietly. I just didn't know how to protect you. She nodded as if she had already heard it all before. She didn't need me to explain. She understood. We ate in silence, the weight of the past easing with every bite, every moment of shared normalcy. There was something beautiful in the simplicity of it. The way we didn't need to speak much, but still found our way to each other. After dinner, we moved to the living room. She curled up on the couch, resting her head on my shoulder as we watched a movie, something light and fun, a far cry from the drama that had defined our lives. At one point, she shifted, looking up at me with those familiar eyes. Do you ever wonder what could have been? She asked softly. Every day, I replied. But I'm starting to think what's ahead might be worth more. She didn't say anything for a long moment, just looked at me as if searching for something she hadn't found yet. Finally, she spoke. I think I've always been afraid of being disappointed, afraid that people I trust will leave, that I'll be left with nothing. You're not alone in that fear, I said, taking her hand gently. But I'm here now, Sophia, and I'm not going anywhere. She smiled softly, but there was a sadness behind it, a lingering fear that I could see in the way her eyes flickered. I didn't know if that fear would ever truly go away, but I was willing to fight for it, fight for us. The days that followed were filled with small moments of connection. We worked together, her leading her company with an iron fist, and me quietly supporting her from behind the scenes. I didn't expect to be her equal in all things. I just wanted to be her partner in whatever way that meant. And slowly I found myself more and more a part of her world. Not as a servant, not as a symbol of the past, but as someone she trusted, someone she allowed to be a part of her future. But old habits die hard. It was one late afternoon, a few weeks later, when I was setting up her office for a meeting, that I heard her talking to someone on the phone in the other room. She was speaking in rapid-fire sentences, her voice edged with frustration. I wasn't supposed to eavesdrop, but curiosity got the better of me. No, I don't care how much it costs, she was saying. I need that deal finalized today. I don't want excuses. I'm not asking for anything to be easy. I'm asking for it to be done. There was a brief pause followed by a sigh of exasperation. It's the last thing standing between me and taking everything I've worked for. You don't understand the stakes, and I'm done explaining. I froze. I knew that tone. That was the tone of the woman I had once loved. A woman who would burn everything down to get what she wanted, to prove herself. When she hung up the phone, I walked into the room. Everything okay? I asked, my voice cautious. She looked at me, her expression unreadable. For a moment, I saw the woman I had once feared, the woman who would stop at nothing to win, to survive. But then her shoulders sagged just a little, and she dropped her gaze. I'm sorry, she said quietly. It's just, everything is so fragile. One misstep, and I lose it all. I stepped closer to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone in this," I said softly. "I'm here. I'll stay with you no matter what." She didn't look at me, but I felt her breath catch. "You really mean that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, meeting her eyes. With everything I am, and that was when it hit me. She was still afraid. Afraid of losing control, afraid of losing me, and I couldn't blame her for it. Her world had been built on taking risks, on pushing others away to protect herself. But I wasn't going anywhere. I had already walked through fire to get here. I wasn't going to let her slip away again. The next morning, after a sleepless night of thinking, I made a decision. I was going to show her that the future we could have wasn't just a fantasy. I didn't need to change her or fix her. I just needed to stand beside her to help her carry the weight of her past without letting it crush her. I found her in the kitchen as usual, making coffee. She didn't say anything when I walked in, just handed me a cup with a faint smile. I took a deep breath. "I'm going to be here for you, Sophia, every step of the way." Her eyes softened, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Hope. "I don't know if I can ever be the person I was before," she said, "but I'm willing to try if you'll stay." "I'm not going anywhere," I said firmly, "and I'll help you every step." She nodded, and for the first time, she leaned in for a kiss. Not hurried, not desperate, but tender, as if we were both rediscovering something we thought we'd lost forever. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was real, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. Spring came to the city slowly, like someone afraid to knock on a door they once had to break down. The days grew longer, warmer, but neither of us said it out loud. We were still learning how to be whole again. Sophia and I moved around each other with the quiet rhythm of two people who had learned the language of pain in the dialect of patience. Our mornings began with shared coffee. No longer as strangers, no longer as employer and employee, just as Jason and Sophia, people trying. I had moved out of the guest suite and into her bedroom, not because of passion, but because of peace. Most nights, we just held each other. That was enough. The silence between us no longer hurt. It felt like healing. She was building something again. A new game, a story-driven, immersive experience designed around rebuilding trust. Her team had no idea how personal the project really was, but I saw it. I saw it in every prototype, in every scene she directed, in the way the female lead kept her distance, even when love stood on her doorstep. "You're writing about us," I said one evening while she worked late. She looked at me over the top of her screen. "I'm writing about everyone who's ever been afraid to believe again," she said. "But yes, us too." She worked harder than anyone I had ever known. 12-hour days, power naps between meetings, cold coffee at midnight. But when I brought her tea or massaged her hands after long coding marathons, she would smile softly, her eyes shining with something I didn't dare name until she was ready to. And yet, even in our closeness, a question haunted me. Had she truly forgiven me, or was I still a ghost she kept in her bed because she was too tired to bury me? That question echoed louder when the past came knocking. It was a Thursday when I saw him. Gregory Chen, an old investor, one of the men who had courted Sophia's company back when she was building her empire, back when I was in prison. I remembered him from articles and photos, the way he hovered around her like a vulture wrapped in silk. He came to the office unannounced. I was waiting in the lobby for Sophia when the elevator opened, and there he was. Slick hair, polished shoes, and that same smug smile that never reached his eyes. "Well, well," he said. I'm like a bug he had forgotten to squash. "Jason wasn't expecting to see you here. Last I heard, you were giving foot massages to bored housewives." I didn't react. That was what he wanted. I see Sophia's taste in men still runs toward the sentimental. "She's expecting you?" I asked. "She was," he said, brushing past me. I let him go, but something inside me churned. Not jealousy, not quite. Something older, protective, aware. I watched from down the hall as he entered her office and closed the door. She didn't come out for almost 2 hours. When she did, her face was blank. Not tired, not angry, just distant. "What did he want?" I asked her later. "Control," she said finally. "Or the illusion of it. He threatened you. He offered me a buyout," she said. "Of the entire company? Said it would be smart to exit now before the market shifts." "Are you considering it?" She looked at me then. "No," she said. Because I didn't build this to sell it. I built it to survive it. She didn't say more, and I didn't press, but I knew Gregory wasn't finished. That night, we lay in bed, the windows open to the sound of distant traffic. "You're quiet," she said. "So, are you?" I asked. She shifted beside me. "Do you ever think about leaving?" "Only when I'm afraid you'll ask me to. I won't." "I believe you." But I didn't sleep that night. Not really. 2 days later, I found evidence of Gregory's meddling. Elise brought me a file accidentally left on the printer. A contract proposal from Chen Holdings, complete with valuation estimates. There was no signature, but there were notes in the margin. Sophia's handwriting, cold, calculating, strategic. She had considered it. Not just the offer, but a version of her future without the company, without me. That night, I waited for her in the kitchen. When she walked in, I placed the file on the counter. She paused, looked at it, then looked at me. "You read it?" she asked. "Yes." She didn't move, didn't flinch. "I thought about it," she said, "but not because I want to run." "Then why?" I asked. "Because part of me still believes I don't deserve any of this. Not the company, not you, not happiness." Her voice cracked. "Sometimes I think I'm still that girl who sold herself to survive." I crossed the kitchen slowly and took her hand. "You are not that girl anymore," I said gently. "And you don't have to prove your worth to me. You never did." She let out a shaky breath. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "So am I," I said. "But I'm not leaving." "I know," she said. "That's what scares me the most, that you might really stay, that I might believe it." We stood in silence for a long time. Then she leaned into me, her forehead resting against my chest. "You asked me once if I'd forgiven you." I held my breath. "And the truth is, I don't know." I nodded, accepting it. "But I want to," she continued. "I want to find my way back to you. I want to stop testing you, stop punishing you. I just don't know how." "You're already doing it," I said. "Right now." She looked up at me, tears brimming in her eyes. "I don't want to be afraid anymore, Jason." "Then let's stop running." And so we did. We didn't erase the past. We didn't pretend it never happened. We just started walking forward, one slow, careful step at a time. The next week, she publicly declined Gregory's offer in a live broadcast. She stated clearly that her company was not for sale, that her team was her family, that her mission was not profit but healing. The message went viral. Her followers doubled. Investors backed off. Gregory disappeared. In that same week, she added my name to the company's executive team. I refused at first. "I don't need a title," I said. "It's not about the title," she said. "It's about you being seen beside me as my equal, not my shadow." And so I accepted. I moved from her assistant to her partner, not just in business, but in everything. We still had arguments, we still had scars, but now we had a way through them. One night, as we stood on the rooftop of her building, looking out at the city, she said something I would never forget. "You once gave me $500,000, she said. "I remember, I thought I owed you everything." "You didn't, I know that now," she said, "but you also gave me something worth more than money." "What's that?" I asked. "A reason to believe that love could survive anything." I turned to her. "And what did you give me?" She smiled. "A chance to earn it back." We kissed then. Not like people clinging to a past, but like two souls stepping fully into the future. The beginning of the end didn't come with thunder or fire. It came with a quiet moment on a quiet morning, the kind that most people forget. But I never would. I was in the kitchen making coffee the way I always did. Black for me, oat milk and cinnamon for her. The sunlight spilled across the marble like honey, warming the cold stone. Sophia stood near the window, barefoot, wearing one of my old shirts. She wasn't checking her phone. She wasn't barking orders into a headset. She was just still. "Jason," she said, turning to me, "do you know what day it is?" I glanced at the calendar, confused. "Friday," she smiled. "Exactly 3 years since I walked into that suite and kicked you in the chest." I blinked, then laughed. "You mean the moment you reasserted dominance?" "I mean the moment I tested whether you'd kneel for love or ego." I walked over to her, placing the coffee in her hands. "And what did you decide?" She looked up at me, her voice soft. "You knelt for love. I just wasn't ready to believe it then." We drank our coffee together, side by side. No need to fill the silence with anything more. That was the thing about Sophia and me. We had lived through enough noise. Now we craved the peace that came when nothing needed to be said. Later that day, we held a press conference. Sophia's company, our company now, was launching the final beta for her most ambitious game yet. A story-driven, emotional survival experience that mirrored her journey. She called it Resonance. The plot followed a protagonist navigating betrayal, love, loss, and self-forgiveness. It was raw, honest, and beautiful. When asked about her inspiration, she answered simply, "I wrote from memory." No one asked what that meant, but I knew. After the event, we returned to the penthouse, still dressed in our finest. I loosened my tie, and she kicked off her heels. I poured us 2 glasses of wine. We sat on the couch in silence. "You know," she said, swirling the red liquid in her glass, "there's still a part of me that worries it'll all fall apart again." "It won't," I said. "How can you be so sure?" "Because this time, we're choosing each other every day, not just once." She leaned her head against my shoulder. "I used to think love was a transaction," she whispered. "Give pain, get power, give control, get safety. But with you, it was never that." I placed my hand over hers. With me, it was always about hope. We didn't marry right away. In fact, we didn't talk about marriage for months. We just lived, worked, healed, built routines that didn't revolve around punishment or power, but around softness. We found ourselves in the small things, the way she curled into me after a long day, the way I would press a kiss to her shoulder before she walked into a meeting, the way we talked through arguments instead of walking away. Eventually, she proposed, not with flowers or candles. She did it in the server room of her office, barefoot in sweatpants, holding a ring made of titanium and recycled circuit boards. "I want to build a future with you," she said, "one where we both get to keep our dignity, one where neither of us has to kneel." I said, "Yes, of course I did." The wedding was small, just close friends and her younger brother, now a recovering alcoholic who had turned his life around after years of anger and silence. Her mother wasn't well enough to attend, but we streamed it for her from the hospital. We didn't wear white. Sophia wore midnight blue, a color she once told me made her feel powerful. I wore gray because it reminded her of the stormy day we first fell in love. We said our vows in a garden. The air smelled of rain and rosemary. When the officiant asked if we promised to love and honor one another, Sophia smiled and said, "I already do." I didn't cry until we danced. It was slow, unrehearsed, just the 2 of us swaying in the twilight, surrounded by people who knew how much it had taken to get here. I held her like she was something sacred, because she was. That night in our hotel room, we lay in bed facing each other, fingers laced between us. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't found our way back?" she asked. "All the time. And I think I would have survived, but I wouldn't have lived." She touched my face, her fingers tracing the faint scar along my jaw, the one I got during a prison fight I never told her about. "You were always stronger than you thought," she said, "and you were always softer than you let yourself be." We kissed, not with hunger, but with reverence. And when we made love that night, it wasn't a reclaiming of bodies. It was a reclamation of time. We stayed in that hotel for a week away from work, away from the city, away from the past. We slept in late, took baths together, ate breakfast in bed. For the first time, we allowed ourselves to feel happy without guilt. We talked about the future, about building a cabin somewhere remote, about maybe one day having a child, not because we needed to, but because we wanted to raise someone who understood that love was work, not magic. Eventually, we went home, not to the penthouse, but to a new place we bought together. A restored brownstone, earth tones, open shelves, wooden floors that creaked slightly when you walked. A garden that Sophia attended every Sunday. I built her a reading nook. She built me a workshop. We still fought sometimes over dishes, over missed appointments, over who forgot to water the succulents. But the difference now was this. We never used silence as a weapon. We never used the past as a shield. We argued like people who wanted to stay, and we always did. One night, years later, as we sat on the porch during a thunderstorm, Sophia turned to me. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "What?" "Everything we went through, everything we became." I looked out into the rain. "No," I said, "because it made this real. It made you real. It made us real." She leaned into me, her head against my shoulder. "I used to think the world owed me something for all I survived," she said. "And now, Now I think surviving was the reward. Loving you was the rest. I kissed her temple and closed my eyes. We didn't need perfect. We didn't need easy. We just needed each other, and that was enough.